welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the Waiting Journey series. So for today's Waiting Journey episode, I am interviewing my friend Krystal Thomas. Krystal is also the leader of the single women small group of my church, and I have gotten to know her through my small group and also as a friend, and her story is just amazing, and I'm sure that you guys are going to love learning about Krystal. She's going to talk about her waiting journey, her process, what she's learned about herself in this process. I was really interested in a woman's perspective besides my own, and I'm just really excited for you to listen to our conversation. Actually, it's more of a conversation that we're having, and please join us. So keep watching. Hey, Krystal, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad I could, join you today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. Would you like to introduce yourself and maybe share something like a fun fact about you?
The pressure. So hi, everyone. My name is Krystal Thomas. I know Katie from the district church where we go to church in DC. Something fun and interesting about me. I will say during the pandemic, I've been really trying to pick up new skills and talents. So I've been learning how to play ukulele. I've got about 4 chords, so I'm definitely by no means an expert, but it's been really fun getting to, reconnect with music and just enjoy some time with family.
That's great, Krystal. We all need some self-care and fun things to do during quarantine.
So true.
Well, I want to thank you for being part of the Waiting Journey series, and I know Krystal from TDC. She's also the leader of our single women small group, and I really love and enjoy it. So I'm really excited, Krystal, to have you and to learn more about you and your waiting journey.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, what has your waiting journey looked like for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. So first, I'm going to acknowledge that when we talk about waiting, it's so countercultural to everything else that's going on in the world right now. We live in an age where there's instant gratification, where you're always on 24/7, and for the most part, the answers are known within a very short window of time. And so when we're talking about waiting and God's timing and purpose and the intent behind it, it's something that we're consistently learning. Like, I wish I could say like, oh, in my waiting journey, I'm now like an expert in waiting, and like, I don't get impatient and I don't get angry or frustrated. But that's not true. We're human beings who are in the world, but are called not to live in it. And that we operate within that tension. And so for me, it's been a lot of growth. It's been a lot of grace, not only for others around me, but also for myself. Really taking the time to allow grace for my past self, for some of the things that I've done that are not necessarily I view as mistakes, but they were definitely lessons learned. I'll put it that way. And so as I've been waiting, I've really been developing not only my faith, but really valuing the purpose of hope and the power and purpose behind endurance and allowing myself to be human in that process. I think a lot of times when we talk about waiting, we expect, perfection. We expect us to like not stumble, to not be frustrated, to not have all of the full range of emotions that come with being human. And so it's just really been going deeper and finding out that I know less and less and less. And I'm sorry if that was a bit of a ramble, but there's just so much to waiting, and it's often viewed as being such a negative thing when really it's such a blessing. I really feel like I'm being refined and learning more about myself each day.
Yeah. And so what is something that, sometimes we are all waiting for something to be fulfilled in our lives? What is it that you have been waiting for in your waiting journey?
Oh, there's so many things. I will say, what I've been learning in my waiting journey is that my desires, while like the core of them, the core root of it hasn't changed, the way that I'm looking at it has changed. I'm going to focus on two areas. So one is growing up in a small town in West Virginia and being one of the only people of color, oftentimes in the room, and always feeling like I had to prove and not only be good, but to be the best, you know, and that just added a lot of sense of pressure and really gave me this false perception that I was carrying the entire race on my back, which no one can do and no one should. But I feel like that's that's a similar experience to a lot of women of color growing up in today's world. And so I've always wanted to, like, success has always been kind of like, it's become almost like an idol, where I want to, you know, make a certain amount of money. I want to be at a certain level, a certain position, doing a particular job. And it's not saying that we can't have dreams or we can't have these things, but the issue is where you're putting your value. Who am I? Who is Krystal? You know what I mean? Am I more than just a job title? Am I more than just a salary? And when I'm willing to put all of my time and energy solely into a position or a title because I feel like that's where my identity is or my value lies, that's an issue. That's a problem. And so while I still strive for success, thankfully in my waiting period and my waiting, I'm going to say waiting process instead of period, but my waiting process, I've rediscovered what success looks like. It's now more of a broader thing. It's being fully known and accepted, and to strengthen my faith. It's being able to walk into a room and not feel like I have anything to prove, but to just be. It's being able to remind others of their agency and create space for them to thrive as well. And so by broadening that definition has really helped me. Similarly, singleness, which, you know, Katie mentioned, you mentioned that we're in our single women small group. But I've always had the desire for a family, a husband, you know, being able to see the beautiful relationship of my parents, but also struggling with some of the times in which I've seen marriages taken out of context or being made into idols, whether it results in domestic violence, things like that, like just kind of really wrestling with what a God-centered marriage looks like and wanting that, but not really being able to find or see a partner that embodies that. And part of that waiting process has led to being more fully comfortable in my singleness and really exploring what it means to like live fully in Christ and as a single woman. And so, like I said, like the desires are still there, but like the focus shifts, you know, focusing on God and the purpose that he has for my life has allowed me to see a broader vision of what those desires and dreams are, that ultimately has led to a lot of healing, a lot of growth, and just a lot of all-around fulfillment.
Wow, Krystal, everything you said is just very, very powerful. And I want to address the first point you made about success and feeling pressured as a Black woman, being the only, sometimes the only person in the room. I can relate to that, not as a Black woman, but as a Latina woman. I actually, this week, I was at a work training, and I was two, there was another Latina woman, 2 out of like 72 white women in the room.
Wow.
And, you know, it does bring a sense of like, wow, like loneliness in a way. And also like, we're fighting against forces that are bigger than us, almost like systemic, right? And so I really love that you said recognizing that you can't do this on your own, that it is a lot of pressure. So talk about what those pressures have felt like for you as a Black woman when, I mean, it relates like to those 2 points that you mentioned, success and dating and getting married. Is there a cultural pressure to get married? Is there, tell us about that.
Sorry, I interrupted you, but I could feel it. So for those of you who are from West Virginia or the country, you already know, like I'm an old maid at this point. My neighbor actually told me that. Most of my friends are married on like their third or fourth kid. And that's just the culture here. It's not that it's bad or that it's good. It's just that my life has looked differently. But I didn't always accept that truth, like that both things can be good and separate. To me, I was looking at my life as to what am I doing wrong where I haven't found this partner or this person that I can share my whole life with. And God just had a different plan for me. And it took some time. I'm not going to lie, I was really stubborn. I tried to make my own path, and like God politely but directly brought me back around. But a lot of the pressure not only came from the culture that I grew up in and with my friends, because oftentimes when I'm talking about feeling that there's something wrong, my friends lovingly would also ask, how come you haven't found someone? You know, I have a friend of a friend. I can maybe do this. My family very lovingly wants me to like have a family and experience all the same joys that they have. But they were like, well, you know, maybe your standards are too high. So I'm gonna pause.
Let me tell you about standards. Devon Franklin, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, he said, how could God's standards be too of a high standard for God to meet?
Amen.
You know, and as a Christian woman, I know that you know, I can't speak for everyone else. You know, everyone else has a different faith, but in our in your context as a Christian woman, you know, you're relying on a higher power, you know, and it's limiting God to say that he can't meet those standards, you know. Anyway,
it really is. And it's also one of those where I had to get comfortable in knowing that what I was doing was the right thing, because I believe in the beauty and the sanctity of marriage. I'm not going to settle in a relationship that I know is not going to spiritually help me grow and get closer to God, or two, that I also am not emotionally ready for. And so I think that's another part to that, of wanting something but not being refined, not being healed, not being aware of my own areas of growth. And I say that not saying that when you get married or when you find the person that you're necessarily perfect. By all means, no. I mean, there was a sermon series that we were watching from Transformation Church talking about singleness and saying about like relationships and marriage only amplifies what you're already dealing with. But in order for me to even get to a place where those, not even just standards, but like the vision of the type of relationship that I wanted required me to go through a lot of things about learning about myself and my faith and my walk with Christ.
What have you learned about yourself in this?
Oh, sure. That kind of segues into the work piece as well too. I will say, I've always had like this like fire in me. My parents were like, you know, we loved it, but oh my gosh, you were so passionate about everything. Like, and that plus empathy, like bleeding heart for everyone. My mom always tells a story about, for some reason, I always liked to wander as a kid. So we were in Kmart and I would just like disappear. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, you just get so stressed out. And she found me one time. I was talking to this like random man, and this guy had like Confederate flags all over him. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, what is this man going to do to my child? Like freaking out. And the man pulls out like this handkerchief and like wipes my nose and like pats me on the head and is like just talking to me like as if like there's no like racial thing going on whatsoever. And that's just kind of always how I've been. It took me a while to come to terms with this, but I really struggled with being othered growing up and feeling like I didn't have a place or that I didn't necessarily belong. And it was in those experiences of being excluded that my empathy and the desire to connect with others and not be limited by stereotypes really allowed me to kind of see that there's like a lot of strength and agency and beauty in having that passion, that I'm not an angry Black woman. I'm passionate. I'm direct. You know, I'm a leader. but then also allowing that softer side of me too, that I'm empathetic, that I'm caring, that I want to be nurturing. I feel like, so for instance, I work right now in corporate America, and I feel that there's always this kind of desire to be cutthroat, get to the top, be efficient. But there's also a type of leadership that comes with helping, that comes with building up others, and so what I've really learned is to shift this mindset of the scarcity mindset to more of like an abundance, that there's space for me and others, that as I want to be seen and acknowledged, not only as a person and a human being, an image bearer of God, I have to do that same thing for others, even when they are not always kind. And so I've found a lot of strength in that. I found a lot of strength in the vulnerability and being honest, not only with my feelings, but also expressing that, which is hard. And there's just been so much of a transformation in that space. I don't know if it's been similar for you growing up, but like for me, I don't know if showing emotion, like we're not robots, I get that. But like being outward with your emotions or your expression was seen as being weak, or not having a tough skin. Yeah. This world is hard. Racism exists. Why are you emotional? And not being able to have that space to like, no, you're a person, you're grieving and you're hurting. And what does it mean to unlearn some of these things to allow your full self to develop and to be?
Oh my gosh, Krystal, like those are some powerful wisdom nuggets that you've just dropped. And I'm currently reading Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, and she talks about all of that. She talks about, vulnerability, and also how can you dare to lead in a different way, and I love that your leadership style, even though you felt this pressure to succeed, and almost like might be a hierarchy within the hierarchy in cultural, right? Like, oh, I need to be the best, right? And so, but it just seems like you've took a step back, and you've learned in this process that it's really about embracing yourself and also embracing others who may be feeling similarly to you, right? And I agree with that, and relate to the cultural pressures of in my family. Like it's we're all about success too. We're all about like, let's hustle.
Right.
And although I admire that, like my mom has been that way, like she's instilled this hardworking trait, passion in me. And I'm also very passionate, as I've learned from her and my family. My family has immigrated. We've immigrated to this country, and the aim has always been to be the best that you can be for your children, for your for the generation coming up. And I'm grateful that they've reaped what they've sowed. At the same time, I feel as though that there hasn't been a lot of room for emotion. Like, let's talk about how we feel, like let's talk about our emotional growth too. And I think in some ways, as the future like me and my cousins, like we've have to unlearn that. I can't speak for them, but yeah, for me, like I feel like I've had to unlearn that it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. And sometimes at work, like I work in the mental health field, and even sometimes at work, like it becomes like, my training has been as a therapist, and although in the mental health field all we talk about is feelings, let's talk about feelings. There's this pressure to be strong, because you are providing a service, and be strong for your clients. And I don't want to share too much, because is the perception going to be that I'm not cut out for this, that I need my own help? And the truth is that of course, like we need our own supports too, especially in that field, or even in general in corporate America. You know, we need our own, like, in what space can I process all of this? So what has been I just love how you're willing to embrace others. And what has been your outlet for you to also have your space to process all of these pressures as it relates to success and dating?
That's a good one. I will say, before coming, so I've always been blessed to be able to connect with others. But like when you're talking about that close, like, sense of Christian community, that was something that was very new to me when I came to TDC. I remember so TDC, we have a bunch of small groups. We'll have service on Sundays, but small groups are really where you're able to come with a smaller group of people and really go deeper, not only in the desires of your heart, but the things that you struggle with. And so I remember being in the group and I'm like, oh, people share their feelings with like complete strangers, like looking around, like kind of so confused. And those spaces actually became the part where I'm able to not only like relieve some of the stress that I have, whether it's from work or things that I'm learning about myself or my walk in my faith, but to be able to learn and hear from others' experiences who are similar or different from me, and that we're united in our love of Christ, you know. And I think it's very easy in a world where we're so connected to feel so alone, because the types of interactions or the communications that we're having are not meaningful. And I don't mean to like be overly critical, but there's not like, how do I truly connect with you? You know, like how, like being more intentional about truly connecting with others. And having those spaces has been helpful for me. I will say also taking time to be alone with God has also helped center me, because as much as I love my community and being surrounded by others who share my faith and others who don't necessarily share my faith, but allow me to still go stronger. And because I feel from them, I also learn more about myself and what I believe. But also just having that intimate time with God has been really helpful, especially with my singleness. I don't know about you, Katie, but a lot of times I would always be like, oh, he's coming. You just have to wait. Like you just kind of hear those same things from people. And I was realizing the comfort that I was looking for was never going to come from another person. It was from God, you know, wanting to have someone who understood the desires of my heart and the pain I was experiencing, and providing the peace and the guidance and the love to allow me to live beyond that. Do you know what I mean? Like still having and recognizing those feelings, but know that they're known, that I'm seen, and that I'm heard. I think there's just so much that's so powerful in itself. And so those two things, especially being in quarantine, have been things that I've been really leaning into, in making sure that I stay grounded and focused on Christ.
Yeah, I think that is amazing. Like, I love what you said in the beginning about reshifting your focus. I recently heard someone say that you give energy to what you focus on. And so I really love what you just said about, because I have experienced that myself, that, like you said, those comments of he's coming, have faith, you know, or sometimes like, have you set yourself a deadline?
I know, right?
30 years old.
Mine was by 25. Do you, like, you didn't know me when I was 25, but Krystal at 25 was in no ways ready to have a marriage or children, you know? But I do think that speaks a lot to what you were saying earlier about the pressure and the deadlines that we put on ourselves. and how do we challenge ourselves to look beyond that, to look beyond the life that our parents put on us, the life that society tells us to live, and just recognize that you, as you are as a person, are enough. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to achieve anything in order to change the value that you already bring just by entering a room.
Love it, love it. And is a woman more than their partner, more than their ability to get married, their ability to have children? Like, there's women who don't want to get married. Mm-hmm. There's women like Oprah, who never got married. They didn't want to get married. They're successful. They don't want to have children. Her mothering is in her purpose, and her mothering is in mentoring other women. So what's your view on womanhood as a Black woman? Ooh. As a Black woman, what's the legacy that you would want to have as a single Black woman who's learned so much from her own process and journey? And sorry if that question's...
Amen. No, that's a good question. I'm also going to say, anyone who's watching this, you need to ask yourself that exact same question, because I do often think we limit ourselves by what we see and not necessarily where we're being called or being led to. I can say that I honestly never thought that I, growing up in West Virginia, would have had the experience to travel around the world, meet people speaking different languages, having different experiences, finding a church where I feel at home. Like, there's just so many things that have happened in my life that had I had stuck to my limited plan, I wouldn't have had the chance or opportunity to experience. And so I really, for my legacy, what I really want, and what I hope that I can do is that I broaden the I'm going to take it a step back. So when I was younger, growing up in West Virginia, like I said, there was a very limited, kind of almost in a box, of how, Black women were to be or behave, what they could achieve. And I just keep thinking thinking back at that younger version of myself and other women like me who feel limited by the color of their skin, who feel limited by their gender. And really just an honest legacy that I hope to achieve is that I'm creating a space in which young girls of any race or any background go into it not feeling limited by any stereotype, any structure, just that they can go and just be, and that's enough. And that comes with being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to create space, even when it's hard, being willing to have, I don't call them difficult conversations, I call them conversations of understanding. I know, true conflict, major hat on there. But that's really what I want to leave behind. I want it to be that for the girl or the woman who comes after me, she doesn't have to sit and have a performance review where her boss puts in her review, wow, he's surprised that she's articulate. Got 2 master's degrees and 2 bachelor degrees. I would hope that I can speak and that I can write. I want it to be that when a young girl of color wants to date or fall in love, that, the society isn't telling her that she can't date a particular person because of the color of their skin, or that there's shame attached to not fitting a particular mold or the policing of an identity. Like, I just want my goal is to work towards broadening what it means to just be, and insert whatever you want there. Now, years ago, my success and my legacy would have looked entirely different. I want all these houses and super materialistic. And this is how my kids are not student loans. My kids are not going to have student loans. That would have been my legacy. But when we're thinking about bringing heaven to earth, and being just intentional about the spaces that we create, the connections that we have, broadening the opportunity, the ability, the just the acceptance of just people who are just in this world feeling othered. That's just really what I want to do.
Wow. That is just so beautiful, powerful. I'm just taking it all in, Krystal. And, my hope with this series, and I have faith that young women, other women out there, will take in those words and feel empowered, and feel less alone, because you're right. You are enough as a young woman, as an adult woman. You are enough, and not feeling boxed in or constricted by all these identities, right? Yet not, what's the word I'm looking for? Yet acknowledging that these identities intersect, and how to process all of that, So I love what you just said, and I want to segue into, you've mentioned growing up in West Virginia, you mentioned growing up in the church. I want to segue into celibacy. If that's something you're practicing or not, or if that's something that you felt pressured to do, or what's the view. I just have noticed that I'm not going to generalize for all churches, but sometimes in the church, sex is not something that's normally talked about. I share this in my story, but there's a lot of pressure as a Christian woman to not have sex until marriage and all these things. And although I value all of that, but sometimes there could be a lot of shame that's put on if you don't. And anyway, tell us about your experience.
Sure. And that's such a powerful question. And I'm going to start because that's part of the reason why I created the small group that we're in. Just because there's not a space when we're talking about the church, and I know every church is different. And if you don't have a space like this, I do encourage you guys to create one. But that, there's kind of a space for our married couples, for the kids and everything like that. But when it comes to especially single women and the different types of societal pressure that women experience when it comes to singleness, we didn't have one. And in this space, the goal was to have a whole conversation about singleness, not just on celibacy, which is important, but wanting it to be a space of healing and addressing shame and addressing guilt. And not really having a space like that. Because I kind of also going into that, and I'm not going to generalize for every church, but at least in my previous experience, it was more of a place where people were judged, not so much as a place of broken people covered in God's grace. You know what I mean? And I think that's, even when I share my own testimony and my own experience, reminding myself that it's not a story of my shame, but a story of His grace and His goodness and His character. And so in the group that we have, women have a variety of different experiences. Some have never dated, some have previously been married and are not, some have had sex outside of marriage. I myself have had sex outside of marriage, and it took me a really long time to heal, just dealing with this sense of guilt, of shame, of being tainted, and not being an image bearer of God. It was just such a low point. And if I can, I'll just kind of share the story that I experienced. So I remember I went to a silent retreat. I was in college, and I had broken up with a partner. And I went to the silent retreat, and at the end of the silent retreat, it was a Catholic retreat. We have confession with the priest, and I confessed to the priest about having premarital sex and the shame and everything that I was feeling. And he looked me in the eye and he said, You are forgiven for your sins, but remember this on your wedding day. And I just remember feeling like my soul had shattered, feeling like even if someone is willing to love me, that I'm tainted, that there's still always going to be the stain on me. And he made me hug him. And I'm at a silent retreat, so you can't speak. I don't have my phone. I can't leave. Like, I'm just stuck there. And I just remember just like being like, there are no words, just like feeling already isolated and not fully understood or known as a woman of color. And to find like in one of the last few places that I felt was some sort of acceptance, to hear that, I was just like, oh, well, it's over. I'm just going to be single forever. No one's going to love me. This is just it. And I was sitting under a tree crying. And I opened my Bible and I opened it up to Psalms 103. And it was, as far as the east is from the west, so have I separated the transgressions, your transgressions. And I just remember like just feeling so known and like feeling a weight being lifted from my chest and not really knowing how to describe that. Like, I was experiencing God, but I had never felt it so powerful. You know what I mean? Like, just being in such a place where I was just so broken and in such pain, to be seen and to be known and to be loved and to experience something like that. And I remember looking up into the sky and I saw a vision of my future family. Like, I saw my partner. I saw, well, not what he looked like, because your girl would have a picture and be looking and whatnot, but just like I had a family. Yeah, I had a family, and that it was God's way of telling me the promises that he had for my life, reminding me of his character and the truths that he stands for. I wish I could say that in that moment it was like, okay, and then I was back in the church and all these things. Like, honestly, it took me a while to come back, just feeling hurt and just feeling broken. But I will say, in those times where I was really struggling with my faith, I met others who were struggling too. And even in those moments, being able to have honest conversations about what I believed, and where I felt God was calling me, and kind of kind of shifting those conversations from being angry at the church and looking to God. And that's what really brought me to TDC. Since that moment, I have been practicing celibacy. My friends laugh at me because they're like, my friends that are not Christian, but they were just like, oh my gosh, whenever it's like you need to relieve stress or things like that, they're like, oh, well, you just need to like have a one night stand or something like that. And that's never been me.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to attack or provide shame for anyone that does practice that, but I just know who I am as a person, and what I long for, that does not feed into my spirit or into my soul in a way that is constructive or positive, or how God is calling me to live. And so it has been very lonely, especially being in a world that's really saturated by sex. And oftentimes I am the oddball. But I know that it's worth it. I know that the waiting is worth it. And it doesn't mean that I don't have those desires. It doesn't mean that I'm not human. I allow myself to feel the things that I feel. I allow myself to grieve for not like having a partner now, or being in a position that I necessarily envision for my life. But I know ultimately that my hope is in God, and that things will come in his right timing. And I'm able to do that by what he's done in my past and how he's come through and where he's brought me from.
Wow, that is so beautiful, Krystal. And I'm sorry that you went through that experience, like you said, in a space that you expected comfort, you experienced shame, and how that could even impact how you view, or how others who experience that in a church view God, or view life, and view themselves, and this idea of like, and there's so much, like in other cultures too, there's so much shame, if you have sex outside of marriage. There's so much like it's almost like the message is like, you're unworthy. And that's not true, you know? And the fact that you took some time to spend some time with God, because what the priest said is something that he said, right? It's not necessarily what God said. And so that you took some time to reflect on that, and that you heard something differently, that you are loved, that you are accepted, that you're not stained, you know?
Yeah, I was, and that's what breaks my heart when I'm having these conversations, even now with like the pandemic, and even just with the murder of George Floyd, and just like there's just so much pain right now, and I see people who have been broken or hurt by people in the church, and not being able to comfort them. In the ways that God gives me comfort, because they are still dealing with that hurt and that pain. And I think that's, I'm like adding to my legacy as we go. But I do think that that's part of it, is allowing others to experience what it means to live as a Christian. Because I feel like oftentimes the loudest voices get the attention. And there's just so much healing that needs to happen. And I think that's why I've been just so grateful. And again, I'm by no means perfect. Like, like your girl stumbles daily. But I hope to live my life in a way that reflects how God has blessed me, and that is an instrument and a tool and a vessel that can be used for reaching others. And it just really starts by being humbled, being vulnerable, and being honest about, who we all are. I mean, just even in our group and in our space, being able to be able to talk about our past, being able to talk about the desires that we look for, we long for, and being able to share in the disappointment, in the pain and the suffering. And I just think by showing the full range of what it means to be in community, what it means to believe in Christ, what it means to heal in community, it's just a lesson and a message that needs to be told in this time.
Yeah, I love what you just said, and connected that to our current times, because we do need to talk about what's going on. And I'm very proud we're part of a church. TDC stands for the District Church. You're welcome to come.
Yes.
It's
We're online.
It's online right now. From all over the world, you can join us. And if you're in the DC area, we're in Washington, DC on 16th Street. And I just love that, our pastors are I mean, they're dedicating time to give space for the injustices and what's currently going on. They have Black children themselves, and just, even sharing, their own experience right now, and how difficult it is, and so I love everything that you just said, and it's just a time to embrace each other. I think, especially as women, like women supporting women, sometimes
So true.
we do shame on, or there's competition, there's cattiness. I don't know about you, Krystal, but like in the Latino community and Latino women, sometimes there's a lot of cattiness, a lot of like, who's going to get to the top first? I'm not going to help you because I worked hard for this, and it's like reshifting that focus on like, how can we build each other up? How can we open a space for our experiences, the good and the bad, or not only like, not bad, but like what we've learned, our past, how can we open
being human? We're not perfect. We're naturally flawed.
Space for healing, and like I love what you're doing with the single women small group. Like I've experienced that sense of, I'm welcomed here, my experience is welcomed, I can be honest, and embraced. And so I love what you're doing. And I think that as women, like we need that, like we don't, and shame creates depression, shame creates trauma and loneliness. And I just love what you're doing, Krystal. And so just to end
Mhm.
our conversation today, what what would you want to tell women out there, other single women out there? Like, what advice would you give them who are struggling, who are like waiting to, with this, holding on to this, like, he's coming.
Yeah.
Uh, like, what would you tell them, or not feeling like they can relate to this he's coming comment, like, oh, I just don't want
Yeah.
him to come. I want to
Yeah.
be single. So what would you tell them?
Several things. I know I was like gonna go for like another 30 minutes on that. But first, that you are enough. Um, God created us as individuals. Yes, there are so many amazing things that come with marriage and relationships. I do think at some point we did make them idols. And so just walking in the truth that you are enough as you are, that you don't need another person to define you or to provide value or worth or like add to your identity, that you came already whole. And I think, especially with women, that's not necessarily a story that we're taught or a truth that we're taught. Um, we're often defined by either producing children or the partners that we have or the daughters of whoever. So that would be my first thing, and that's essential. Oftentimes people will say like, "Oh, love yourself," and you're like, "I don't like. How do you love yourself if you don't really fully understand what love is?" And I think that starts by first just living fully in who you are right now. Yes, hold on to your dreams, hold on to what you envision for your life. I'm not saying for you to give up on that, but to live in the present. I know for myself, I'm guilty in thinking of the future, thinking of where I want to be. How do I get there? Taking those steps. I'm very efficient, very strategic. God gave me these gifts. They're great. But in the moment, allowing me to just celebrate that I'm here. I'm here against all odds. I'm here against all the obstacles. I'm here against all the things that have happened in my past. And just to be thankful for those moments. And then lastly, I would say to find a group of single women in your life. Now, let me tell you, like, we have friends that we love that are there and they support us. But when it comes to what you're experiencing and feeling alone and not really fully being able to share what you're experiencing, you need a group of women. You need a group of women who can share in that, or at least one, that you could just really walk through life in. We were talking about in the group about we don't really celebrate outside of like weddings or baby showers. Like it's always kind of like tied around those things. So what does it mean to like throw a party? Like we had someone in our group who bought their first house. So we were all like turning up and excited that this person got their first house. We had someone that turned 40. So like, how do we celebrate a new decade of life? And just being very intentional that when we're talking about community, we're talking about sharing, we're talking about openness, we're talking about being able to be fully known, but we're also talking about walking in life with one another and sharing in the ups and the downs and the pain, and that desire for hope. I lied. I had one more thing. If you are a believer, I would say, especially in the season where I've found the most peace and strength, is really leaning into God, whether that's using the Bible app. They have like little stories that are like a couple minutes long that help you stay grounded daily, whether that's through music, Maverick City, like anything that they produce, I've been listening to nonstop, just to remind myself that yes, I'm feeling pain. Yes, I'm feeling sorrow. Yes, there are desires in my heart. But the God that I serve sees and knows and hears and is in me. It is with me in this. And that I'm not experiencing it alone, and that he's still moving and working even if I can't see. And so that's what I would advise. I mean, there's so many other things. Like, I wish I could like give everybody a hug and we could like chat and talk about the struggles with singleness. But the community is key, and that's kind of countercultural. We live in a time where you're supposed to be an individual and handle it, have a tough skin. And I would encourage you to be brave enough to go beyond that, to know when you need help, to ask for that support, and you'll be just amazed about the people that God puts in your life, to help you connect, to help you heal, and all of that.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said, Krystal. And there's also, if I may add, there's
Yeah.
also a beauty in singleness,
Yes.
also that opportunity to being fully known, and that you it's just a time of introspection, and you learn so much about yourself, and you're better
Mhm.
prepared if you want to get married. You're better prepared because you know yourself and you love yourself, you embrace yourself. And I love what you said about when we just celebrate those milestones like baby showers, gender reveals, all marriages, and all these things. But I think that our singleness is also celebratory. And I shared already in my, when I shared about my story, like I celebrate my celibacy.
Yeah.
There's I
That's hard.
celebrate
That's hard.
in no, I know it is in July. Like, oh, another year, but it's also another year of lessons, another year of like
Mhm.
who I've become, what I've accomplished during this time. Like when we
Yeah.
talk about, we put we put energy on what we focus on. In my conversation with Rob last week, like the energy that you put into like having sex and all these things, and like that sexual energy, just transforming it into your purpose, into putting energy into your purpose, and being focused, not being distracted. And sometimes, sex and dating, I mean, those things are not bad, but sometimes it can become a distraction if you overly focus on them. And so it is celebratory to be single. And I just wanted to thank you for
Oh, of
sharing
course.
your story and your
Yeah.
vulnerability. I really appreciate you being a part of this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. That's how we all heal when we're able to be honest and to share our testimony and how God moves in our lives. And I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here and be in this space.
Of course. Well, thank you, Krystal, for being here. Wow, that conversation with Krystal was so beautiful, so powerful, so impactful. I learned so much by listening to her. It spoke to me too, and I love how the conversation turned into this conversation about sisterhood, about women supporting each other, about just learning about her journey as a Black woman, as a Black Christian woman, and just how, and about not only about those identities, but also about who she has become, who Krystal is as a person, who Krystal is as a child of God, as a woman of God. And I just loved learning more about her. And I know that her message is going to impact other women's lives who are watching. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was just really, really, really powerful what she had to say. And I am just so grateful that you were here to listen to Krystal share about her waiting journey. And yeah, so this is just really awesome. Stay tuned for next week. I will be interviewing Catherine Flamini, who is also my friend, and we will be talking about her waiting journey. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on my next video. Bye.